How to save a franchise. If The Last of Us or Naughty Dog cross your mind at all these days, it's probably to think, how, if at all, could they be saved? That is, if you're in the vast majority of gamers burned by what is perhaps the most disappointing sequel in gaming history. Yeah, and in my opinion, I will say. Look, I don't want this to be a red team, blue team thing, but I will say I think it's really high time that fans of Last of Us 2 faced up to some hard facts, and that the future of Naughty Dog and all of their franchises depend on what choices they make in the next year or so. Reality is a stubborn thing. I'd love to have 8-pack abs. Reality, unfortunately, isn't so cooperative. Reality is like gravity. It's there and acting on you whether you like it or not. And though you say that people just didn't get Last of Us 2 or the mature themes were too much for you to handle, you can't escape the laws of physics. Or in this case, economics. It's a fact that nobody bought The Last of Us 2. Now, I have a whole other video about that. You can go check it out. I've got the receipts. But the TLDR is that despite a budget rivaling most Hollywood blockbusters, Last of Us 2 barely made back its $100 million budget and very likely was a loss for Sony, depending on how many millions were pumped into advertising. The quote, fastest selling PS4 game of all time quickly found its way into the bargain bin and was heavily discounted within a year of release, from $60 all the way down to $20. Talk about a price drop. Today, a copy of the Part 1 remake for PS4, no less, will cost you more than a copy of Part 2. Don't you just love the free market? If that wasn't enough, God of War Ragnarok sold more copies in just 3 months than Last of Us 2 did in 3 years. At what point are you going to admit that numbers just don't lie? I'll try to keep it light on the history, but context matters here, and we need to keep a few key facts in focus if we're going to have a thoughtful discussion. Number 1, Last of Us 2 was not a financial success. Be as mad as you want, yell, scream, stomp your feet, throw that fastest selling PlayStation exclusive line out. It's not going to change the truth. The game didn't sell. Number 2, Last of Us 2 is not featured in Sony's PlayStation Plus subscription, alongside other games like Horizon Zero Dawn or God of War. It's also never featured in ads for the console. Very telling. Number 3, the Part 1 remake didn't sell. And number 4, the PC port did not sell either. Now, before you go all hog wild in the comments saying that sales jumped 238% because of the HBO show, I'd just like to point out that 238% increase of 0 is still 0. Now, I'm sure the sales, weren't 0, but if the sales number are as low as I imagine they are, then such an increase is nothing really to write home about. Oh, and all that cringy stuff they put in the show on HBO, it honestly didn't really do the franchise any favors, let's be honest.
Everything you see in our town, greenhouses, livestock, all shared. Collective ownership.
So, communism.
Nah, it ain't like that.
It is that, literally. This is a commune. We're communists.
As an aside, that whole 238% headline just goes to show how captured the media are and will write any flattering headline about this franchise in a futile attempt to defibrillate the game's rotting, mushroom-riddled corpse. That guy who gave the 10 out of 10 IGN score, he now works for Naughty Dog. That doesn't concern you at all? You don't that doesn't raise an eyebrow? At all? Not at all? Really? If you're going to argue that the HBO series will somehow magically make a bunch of normies who watched it all run out and buy PS5s, then there's a bridge I'd like to sell you. But what of the upcoming free-to-play version of Factions that Naughty Dog has been working on? Great question, but I've got an even better one. How on earth do they think that a games-as-a-service model can work when you've alienated more than half of your core audience? Another one of those gravity-like, inescapable realities is that because Part 2 was so poorly received, that there are millions of gamers who now refuse to buy anything from Naughty Dog. They have a massive PR perception problem and a community problem. As far as I can tell, they've done absolutely nothing to address it. A game as a service needs a massive audience, and they not only need to play the game, they need to spend money in it. Now, we don't know 100% if this Factions game is going to be free to play, but it's heavily suggested by a job listing for a Lives Ops producer posted back in October last year. So I'm operating under the assumption that Naughty Dog's Hail Mary Pass is this free to play game that will sell skins or loot boxes or whatever to players. Now, I liked Factions. I thought it was great, but personally, I just can't see myself really playing anything else from the studio. Not unless, and here's where we get into the meat of this video, not unless certain changes are made. Here are, as I see it, the only ways to save this franchise and this studio. Number 1, Neil Druckmann apologizes. Now, I'll probably need to hold my breath longer than a pearl diver for this to happen, but if I were a Sony bigwig, I'd make it very clear that Neil's got to eat some humble pie publicly and then ride off into the sunset. He needs to do a very visible interview where he admits he was wrong. He was wrong for accusing people criticizing the game of being bigoted. He was wrong for targeting YouTubers with DCMA takedowns. He was wrong for model swapping Joel into that E3 trailer, tricking us into all, believing that he was going to be in the game. And wrong pretty much from the start to finish in the writing of Part 2. I've gone ahead and used AI to imagine what this could sound like.
Hey everyone, it's been a while since we talked, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to clear the air. I know I said that we wouldn't let you down if you trusted us with Part 2, and I want to recognize now that was a lie. I knew when I said that many of you would be disappointed at the direction I ultimately chose for the sequel, and looking back, I'm disappointed too. Without Bruce Straley's incredible talent, I was honestly lost in terms of where to go with a second game and got obsessed with some pretty bad ideas. I was heavily influenced by Anita Sarkeesian, and for a while, all I could think about was prostrating myself at her feet and pleading for forgiveness for being a man. Also, I would then spend the rest of my natural life washing her feet. I recognize now I was a complete simp, and I put all that woke stuff into the game just to impress her. I'm sorry you all had to watch that sex scene with Abby. That's my bad. I fully and completely accept the L you have given me. I will now retire to a life of solitude. Goodbye.
Not likely to happen, but if they want to save the studio and what little is left of their reputation, then this is the key thing. Druckmann has got to exit. Period. Number 2, pivot to another franchise. The world wouldn't be that much worse of a place if we got another Jak and Daxter game. Uncharted is the obvious choice, but I think most people consider that series to be pretty much wrapped up. They could introduce a new IP, but that's very unlikely in this scenario, as they'll never get another green light to spend the money needed to build something like that from scratch from Sony. You see, Naughty Dog as a studio is in a catch-22, a contradiction. They can't make a new game without a budget, and because of what happened with Part 2, they'll never get another check that big from Sony. They can only work with old assets and recycle them into a new product, hence the remake, and the PC port, and this Factions game. It's all built on stuff that they just have already lying around. It's already built. Not to mention the mass exodus of talent from the studio after Part 2, with more than half of the original staff leaving amid rumors of crunch and bad working conditions. You ever notice how every new Ubisoft game is just built on old assets? The same thing's happening here. And by the look of the PC port, which seems to be held together with duct taped and crushed dreams, talent at the studio has, let's just say, seen better days. Number 3, never mention Part 2. Ever. The big question that everybody has about the TV series is, what are they going to do about the story for Season 2? You're basically reading tea leaves to figure this out, as all we have to go on are vague quotes from the creators saying they could potentially make changes. I'm not hopeful, though, as Craig Mazin has already expressed admiration for Part 2 as a story, so it looks like post-apocalyptic transgenderism, Abby McMuscle's golf club, and the utterly nonsensical revenge story are all in the cards. Part of me actually wants to see them try to do it, like 100% seriously, try and take the worst story ever told in a game and make it into a show. It would really be something to see it get a 2% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. The only downside is we'd have to hear Bella Ramsey whine and moan about how we're all evil bigots or whatever, but I'm willing to put up with that just to watch Part 2 go down in flames all over again. Number 4, a word we are all really, really tired of now: woke. If the recent Bud Light saga has told you anything, is that people are just worn out from being lectured when they're expecting to be entertained. Yeah, imagine you went to a magic show and the magician starts berating you about how you should all be vegans. and then doesn't even do any magic tricks. Worst magic show ever. And people also don't like to be insulted. It's crazy, I know. But just because you don't incessantly root for Group X or Group Y, it doesn't make you a hateful person. It's fine to just be neutral. Most people are neutral. To be honest, I haven't heard this many complicated theories about human sexuality since college, and I know I'm not the only one that just finds it all kind of exhausting. I just want to play a zombie game for 5 minutes without getting lectured, because on TV and newspapers and the internet, it's already a nonstop lecture about what I should believe. And people come to entertainment to escape all of that in the first place. I recently saw the new Puss in Boots movie, and I was utterly stunned that a major modern Hollywood film did not have one single call out to a current social issue. It was like getting a glass of lemonade after a 6-week trek across the desert on foot. It's fine to have causes you care about and to be engaged with whatever you feel will enable social thriving. That's not what I'm being critical of here. But jamming these things into video games, it both ruins the fun and doesn't even get your point across anyway. Isn't the whole point to change people's minds if that's what you really are after? Is a video game the right medium for that? Maybe if it's artfully well done enough, but obviously in this case that didn't happen. The wokeness of Last of Us 2 clearly had the opposite effect and alienated what had once been a rock-solid core audience of fans. And these are not hateful people. They just want to be entertained. Number 5, I saved the best for last because, hey, hopefully you stuck around for this entire rant to get my big special idea, so here it is. They should make an entirely new game, but for PSVR 2. It can be shorter, more concise, and tell a new original story, one written by somebody who hopefully can actually write. The setting is perfect for a VR game, and they've already got all the assets to make it happen. They can easily tap Sony for the VR programmers and kit bash the assets they've built for previous games to make a new one. Hell, make part 1 a VR game, and you'll sell a ton of copies. What, at this point, do they have to lose? Not only the future of the studio, but all of its franchises depend on them taking deliberate and thoughtful action. They need to turn the ship around, but pretending they haven't blown their own foot off isn't a strategy. You're not going to win the 500-meter dash with 1 foot. The free-to-play thing is, in my estimation, going to be dead on arrival, and anything Druckmann touches is toxic. If Sony wants to turn this L into a W, they could do a lot worse than consider what I've offered here. That'll do it. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know in the comments what you think they should do. And hey, if I'm right, if I'm wrong, tell me what you think. I want to hear what you've got to say. And please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, as those are all a really big help and will encourage me to make more videos. Until next time, game on.